All right. Well, we will get started. So everybody, thank you for joining the Nigel Frank Career and Hiring Guide 2023 presentation slash webinar. This is like a really exciting time for us. We love to gather this information and share it with you all, kind of give you some insight into what individuals like yourself are thinking, seeing, hearing in the market. Share that information with us. We collectively put it together and present it back to you. So we will kind of kick it off. So again, why we're here to talk about the M365 and Azure career and hiring trends for 2023 and beyond. So my name's Patrick. I've been with FRG for about 3 years, Nigel Frank specifically for about 8 months. And I'll pass it off to Rowan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rowan O'Grady. I'm the president of Frank Recruitment Group in the US and Canada. So I have responsibility for all of the various different Frank brands that recruit for different specialist technologies. I've been in specialist staffing for 28 years, almost 20 of those here in North America. Yeah, and I've recruited for many different industries, technology being the main one.
Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Price. I've been with the Frank Recruitment Group for about 6.5 years. Nigel Frank, I'm new to, starting in 2023, but I'm currently overseeing our Southwest Contracts division with a specific focus in Azure.
Thanks, Erin. And then as a little side note, we have an individual who's from Microsoft who will be participating in the Q&A section. So if there's any questions direct related, or other perspective you'd like to get outside of the hiring guide, we have Joe Strenning here to kind of give a little bit of Microsoft insight as well. So we'll get to Joe towards the end of the presentation. So before we kick into some of the stats, the shameless plug that is Nigel Frank, as far as the organization goes, we are very, very laser focused on Microsoft and individuals in that particular ecosystem, whether it's in Dynamics or it's in Azure and M365. While we're here today, we have nearly 400 individuals in our exclusive database, 500 plus global consultants working for us. And at any given time, I think we've got nearly 3 million people that come to our Nigel Frank website, whether that's inquiring, submitting requests for jobs, et cetera. So we've got some really great traction. I'm very proud of how we've kind of cornered the market when it comes to Microsoft and the candidate space. So that's a little bit about us, and then we'll kind of get into some of the specifics from the career and hiring guide. So this is a comprehensive, booklet that we put together every year for your sake specifically. So we want individuals to know what's going on in the market, and we could use marketing, outreach, and we could go to, a data organization to gather some of this, but we actually talk to Microsoft certified individuals specifically and pull this data and bring it together. So it's the people like yourself out there, Azure 365 professionals, who give us the insight into what's going on with the market. So again, we talked to nearly 700 people, almost 75,000 data points were analyzed and put together to bring us this report that we want to share with you, so that we can, just be on the forefront of letting you understand what's going on within the Microsoft ecosystem. So some of the things that we'll discuss obviously are the types of certifications, their importance, individuals' satisfaction within the workplace, salaries, things of that nature, trends within the salaries, the digital skills gap, the market itself. So there's a lot of things in here, but hopefully we can tackle most of the things that you're interested in. And if there's something that we didn't touch upon, please bring it up in the Q&A. So when we gathered all this information, what did we necessarily find? I just mentioned on the last slide, like the skill gap continues to worsen despite the economic conditions. I think what we mean there is we've seen many of these tech organizations make mass layoffs, right? And you would think, okay, the talent pool is there for us if I'm an employer on this call. But there is still a shortage in the IT space, specifically within Microsoft. There's just not enough people, despite some of the downturn and the layoffs that we've seen. Organizations are still struggling to find that perfect talent that fits their particular environment. Salary obviously is a topic that is near and dear to most people's hearts. It's going to be touched upon, obviously, but salary is still one of the driving factors out there when it comes to retaining and attracting talent. We've also come across the realization that it's not just about salary, though. Like, things are changing. I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, it's like, how much money can you make? But there's people want to grow. Like, people are inspired to have a career and move up within the organization or get exposure to new technology. So career progression is absolutely critical when it comes to an employer trying to keep people. Conversely, it's also very important for an employer not to burn people out. And we're going to get into how burnout is real. The word burnout is probably a very high and wide word. It's not necessarily, I just work a lot of hours, but there's a lot of factors that can contribute to how someone looks at burnout. And we're going to discuss that to help maybe some of our employers position themselves a little bit better. And us as a leader in the Microsoft community have a duty to sort of help bridge this gap. So a little bit of the agenda. We'll talk about skill sets and upskilling. We're going to talk about candidate attraction, retention, diversity, and then the Q&A. So starting with skills. So as many of you, I assume, probably already know, the end all be all starts with years of experience, right? I think in surveying all those individuals that I referenced, nearly 90%, the most important thing when you're looking for an individual as an employer is, do they have the experience? I think looking down to large projects, you add experience with exposure to large projects, and that is really the crux of what makes an individual coveted by an organization. You can kind of work your way down and you see, obviously, like, technical experience within Microsoft, it correlates quite well to the large, obviously you want to have skill set in the actual like technology that you're hiring for. But I guess where I'm going with this is you start to see that drop off when it comes to like certifications, degree, specific vertical experience. It's really more about like, how long have you been in it? What have you seen? What have you been exposed to? And those are the things that are driving employers to make the decisions about who they're bringing on within an organization. So no surprise to anybody, experience, hands-on, it kind of leads the way. But kind of touching upon, so you go from hands-on experience and certifications. It's always a hot topic, and we're always talking to individuals who are bringing up questions to us around like, do I need this certification to get hired? What type of certification or skills should I be looking to add if I'm newer in my career? And what we see is, for this population, 41% actually have an M365 certification, 37 have an Azure certification, and 22 don't have a certification at all. You saw from the employers that it is it's important and they want it, but again, it's not the end all be all when it comes to making a decision. So if you're a candidate on this call, I definitely think it behooves you to have those certifications because employers want them. But I think just getting a certification and not being exposed to particular environments can be a detriment too, right? Like it really kind of comes down to some of the projects and the technologies that you've been exposed to. So I'm going to kind of move on because we've got some more certification topics to talk about here. So, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Just kind of little trigger happy there. A way to verify. So you're kind of seeing here what what percentage of individuals, you know, it verifies my skills within Microsoft. It gives me better career progression. Um, I think individuals like to have a certification. I think it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel like a subject matter expert. Um, you can see kind of in the middle there, just more trust for my employer. 40% of individuals that have a certification think that it makes them more desirable by their employer. Now, whether that's true from the employer standpoint or not, almost 50% feel if I have a certification, my employer feels safe with me. So just kind of some good perspective. I think you're even getting down to when you get down to the bottom, 28% is a lower number, right? But just having the respect of your coworkers, saying that you have a certain certification, makes individuals feel like it adds value, not only to their particular skill set, but to their complete environment. So you can see, I don't have to read verbatim all these different areas that certifications make people feel, or how it makes them feel. But it's definitely a real thing. And I do think that employers are, how do I want to say this? They're not prioritizing it, but they're definitely supporting certifications within most of the environments that we see. So before we go on to candidate attraction, I kind of want to bring Rowan back to talk about his perspective on upskilling the skills that candidates have, et cetera.
Yeah, can you hear me, Pat?
We can.
Yeah, my camera has just suddenly stopped working at the opportune moment, so sorry about that. Yeah, so I think my summary of that would be most candidates, employers would recognize the importance of certification. It's easier to, it builds confidence, and it does improve the skill set. It, like it says right here, it verifies people's knowledge or their skills within the different Microsoft products. So it makes sense. The question is, are employers backing it, and are they willing to invest in it at the same time? And oftentimes, a lot of companies do, but then you have other companies where they get caught in a bit of a conundrum. They're saying, well, number one, we don't really have the time to be able to have this happening. We just need to get on with the work and get the project completed. If we had time to spend investing in certification and training, we would, but we can't. I think the other part is a lot of employers sometimes feel like, well, if I make the investment in these certifications, will the individual just end up leaving and going working somewhere else? Because I invested in the certification. So there is a conundrum there, I think, although at the end of the day, I know that people value the investment and it creates loyalty. So I think the companies that get this right, they just say, look, we're going to invest in our people. We will take the time. It is an investment. It will increase retention. So we're going to do it and not overthink it too much would be my summary on that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Good insight. So candidate attraction, right? How do we get, if we're an employer on this call, how do we get them to pick our company? What are candidates, saying is important to them? So leading the charge again is always going to be salary, right? 42% of people say what motivates them, potentially make a move is salary. But again, it's not everything, right? Like we kind of discussed earlier, like lack of career progression, having the ability to get promoted, working in a really exciting environment. Like those things are very real. You can add up the percentages and it's almost just as strong as the salary. So we're not the days of, hey, if I just outpay my competition, I will bring people on. Yeah, there's a component to that, but if you can't validate that you have a thriving, progressive, forward-thinking culture, you have career progression, you're willing to expose the individual to an ever-changing environment, right? Like I think a lot of times, individuals will join an organization and they'll be there for some time and they'll be super happy, but the IT environment doesn't change much. So their exposure to new Microsoft products stays very stale. So there's all these challenges that, again, like Rowan said, that employers kind of need to get right to keep their people or to attract them from the organizations that aren't doing what they're trying to do. So you can see, work-life balance, working remotely, those are things that have been, post-pandemic, very high on people's. I'm actually surprised the percentages aren't higher, to be completely honest. I found that one interesting in the middle. To relocate to another country, I would have never, I wouldn't have put my money on that one. But that's interesting. It's what the people said. So, so hold on, I'm just kind of moving my screen here. Oh, my screen is finicky today. So employee skills training, like, so what are our employers doing? So I think employers are saying like, hey, we are going to train our people. Like, that's the thing that we're going to invest in. Obviously we can offer higher salary increases, but it's interesting that we talked about what's important to the individual in making a move, and we didn't see anything about employee skills training. They want career progression. We know certs are important to the candidates, but specifically like skills training didn't fall into what candidates say is the most important to them to make a move. Yet from like an employer standpoint, they're investing in employee skills training as the number one thing. So there is a little bit of, I don't want to say a disconnect, because I think some of it's correlated, but like, apples to apples, what maybe candidates prioritize is not what employers seem to be prioritizing. Obviously, money is always going to be at the top there, and we kind of work our way down, and you've got some profit sharing and bonuses. Those are definitely ways to incentivize people to come to your organization. New ways of working remote. We've got the whole hybrid concept, and we've got more slides, as we go forward about remote work. ED&I, diversity policies are very important. I found it very interesting that benefits and perks kind of fall so low. So you're seeing where the shift is, where it's like, I still want to get paid. That's one of the normal ones, but investment in training, profit sharing, equity, things of that nature are kind of leading the way over maybe benefits that we thought, healthcare, things that we typically think of when we think of benefits. So because training and development was like on the top, we went out and we asked, individuals, some of our Azure respondents, like, what are some of the areas that if you were seeking training, you'd want to be, you'd want to focus on? Where are some of these holes? So obviously security in the cloud are just leading the way in almost anything. And that's why we're here, right? We're talking about Azure, we're talking about cloud. So cybersecurity training. I think that some individuals, they obviously start off as a technical individual, but they get asked to lead and drive projects, and maybe having some PM certifications or some formal training around managing large projects, not just having exposure to them. If that's a route they want to go, is obviously important to a lot of individuals that get off and to a good start in the Microsoft ecosystem. They work their way into more of a leader. Advanced technical training, like I said there, project management experience and certs might kind of correlate well with leadership and management training. So here's the areas where those 700 people that we surveyed said are probably the focus areas for individuals like yourself on this call. So the topic that everybody loves to talk about, post COVID is remote work, right? So I was actually quite, I'm not sure what the word I wasn't surprised, but it was interesting to me that actually 43% of Microsoft professionals are working remotely. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, but we're almost at 50%, but you can still see that people are working more of the hybrid than coming in 100%. So you've got a lot of people that are able to work full time, but when you kind of see, the middle there, 15 and 11% are coming in 2 to 3 days per week. It feels like that's where organizations are going, just from obviously the people we surveyed and the individuals that we talked to, like yourselves, it is becoming very hard to place candidates or consultants on site 100%. Organizations are asking for it in some instances, but I think where we usually find that happy medium is, hey, we could use somebody who could come in 2 to 3 days per week. We want to give them flexibility, but maybe collaboration and things of that nature that is just harder to do via video and phone, is sort of working its way back into the ecosystem. So here's a little thing that we put together based on job satisfaction, and you can see the key below: satisfied, neutral, dissatisfied. I'm not actually going to focus too much on the satisfied, because you can see that that's pretty high across the board. Working hours, so I'll go through working hours, colleagues, benefits, work-life balance, company culture, career progression, training and development, overall job satisfaction. But what I see here is the training and development is an area that could possibly use some work. There's some individuals say they're dissatisfied with the training and development in the organization, yet some of the things that pull them to a new organization wasn't necessarily training and development. So I think, some of the things that employees that are looking to make a move or stay with an organization are grabbing onto necessarily aren't always what is kind of holding them back, which could be training and development. So there's an interesting kind of like tug and pull there going on with like what people say drives them, and then maybe what dissatisfies them within their organization. Work-life balance doesn't seem to be too much of a thing. People don't seem to be working with colleagues that turn them off or anything of that nature. So again, I want to just focus on the things that are dissatisfying individuals for those employees or for those employers on this call. So maybe you guys got it right with training and development being number one. And then career progression is also right there too. So two things to focus on, because they're obviously they're giving employees some anxiety or dissatisfaction. So I think before we go, here's a little bit more insight. I was gonna maybe have Rowan jump in, but so we work with both end users and partners alike. We wanted to give you guys some perspective, depending on if you work for an end user or partner. Here's some perspective on the partner side. So 67% end users were considered working for a partner employer. Here's the top 5 reasons why. So I think we've seen that partners, are able to just pay a little bit more. They come, they're on the cutting edge of working with tons and tons of different organizations, worldwide, and they know that in order to be a subject matter expert in a specific technology like Azure, you need to pay to go get the best, right? So you see partners, paying a little bit more than maybe an end user might pay. Also, the opportunity to expand your skills. Like we said, one of the pain points was you work at an organization for a very long time. If the technology is not evolving or the company isn't investing in the newest, latest, and greatest, that might unmotivate the individual who's been in that environment a long time. And partners, obviously having multiple end users as clients, they offer, expansion into all the different types of Microsoft products. So there's a lot of good reasons to move to a partner, and you're seeing some of it here. Obviously, even in working on a diverse range of products, what I just mentioned, is still more than 55% of the people say that's one of the reasons they'd go. So flexible work style, obviously, partners offer that. I think when you've got clients all over the country, remote work becomes kind of essential. So that could play into the flexibility in their work style. Then conversely, we'll talk about end users. Like, why would you want to go to an end user? Well, the stability and the work-life balance of knowing you're going to stay working with the same individuals, you're staying on the same product, you learn the technology, you become amazing at it. Maybe you're not learning new technologies, but you're becoming so so ingrained with what you're working with, creates just sort of that like sense of like I said, stable, a stable environment is really important to a lot of different people at different points of their career. So the ability to work remotely, I think when you've been working with an organization for a long time, those things start to happen. Better training and learning opportunities, right? Like if you're ingrained in a specific IT environment for a long period of time, they see that you're there for the long haul. They're probably going to invest in you as well. So it offers different, training and learning opportunities. So just some different perspective, right? So and I'll read that line at the top. Over half, 59% of partner employees would consider working for an end user. Here's the reasons why, and I think a lot of it comes down to stability. So Rowan, do you want to kind of give your recap there from like from that perspective before we go into retention?
Yeah, camera's still not working.
All right.
I think like what I see from it, there are two key points I would get employers to try and think about. The first one is, for as long as I've done research of this nature, and I've done a whole lot of it across lots of different industries, the biggest contributing factor outside of salary, you just have to pay market rate. You don't have to pay the most, just have to pay market rate. But outside of that, the thing that always comes up next is career progression or career development or just development. And that rarely comes in on the thinking of attraction and retention from an employer's point of view. What employers typically are doing is they're investing in training, but the question is training the same as development? Is it the same as professional development? And when I've done some research digging down into that, what an employee is talking about when they say development is new skills, different projects, new challenges. It doesn't necessarily have to be a very exciting or unusual project. It just has to be different, change and variety. And I think we all know that because we're all employees at the end of the day. Doing something new, learning something different, being exposed to a different way of doing something, a project of a different nature is exciting and interesting. And repetition of the same thing over and over again can become difficult. That point is the biggest contributing factor to turnover, and it's a part that employers don't pay enough attention to. That would be my summary of that. It's a thing to think about. We'll come back and talk about it at the end, I think. Second point is when it comes to remote working, literally in the last 2 months, I would say, we're seeing more and more employers say, look, we're based here, we want them here. Not all of them, but it's just started to come back in more and more, starting to become more common. So I wonder where that's going to go. But what will we settle on will be normal at some point, but we're just not there yet. Something's happening and it feels like a shift back towards in person is becoming more common again.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you. All right, here. So moving over to retention. So, to Rowan's point right there, it's like sometimes just a career change, right? Is what's maybe driving candidates. Now, whether that's a career change outside of the organization, or maybe it's a career change within the organization, a career change is something that's very real. And again, if employers can get that right and change up, just what someone's doing on a day-to-day basis, it's probably going to help with retention. Individuals want to travel. I think COVID gave us that opportunity to live in some different places that we're used to and still work for the same employer. So it's kind of become something that's a hot topic. Work-life balance. We've talked about relocation and travel, could be the same thing depending on where you're working. The redundancy of the job is definitely like kind of, again, the change needed. We're seeing that previous jobs just didn't suit, and then expired contracts, right? So I'm sure there's some contractors on this or individuals who have been a contractor or freelancer, and you can see the importance of, like the stability or just, contracts end and people have to like make a move. They don't always get converted at their employer, nor maybe sometimes they don't want to. So Moving on to the next, I'm sorry if my screen, just bear with me 1 second. Just trying to get my screen to not do that. It's having trouble reading something above. I apologize. But 41% of permanent professionals would consider going freelance, and here is why. Um, Again, I kind of want to, what I want to do here is talk about freelance, but I also want to talk about contracts. Like, why do individuals look at moving into a contract? Well, the higher earning potential. So if you think about any individual that is not on a W-2 necessarily, they don't um, they don't cost the organization that they're working for the same amount of cost with benefits, et cetera. So you can always, I think, good rule of thumb is think from like a annual salary, um, you're probably somewhere safe in that 25%. You can earn about 25% more than you would if you were to equate your annual salary working as a W-2 worker. When you have that opportunity to become a contractor, their earning potential is obviously greater in almost every scenario. Also, contract work, you aren't necessarily um, part of the organization. In some instances, you are, and you become like an arm, but it allows you some more flexibility because you're not maybe held to the same standard as the individuals who are um, full-time employees per se. So it can allow you some more flexibility within your workplace. You move around a lot, you get exposure to different technologies, right? It's not the same environment. 50% of the people that we surveyed find that important, right? And we've talked about that topic a couple times. If you're a freelance employee, um, you get to be your own boss. We obviously know some of the perks involved with that. Maybe that's not for everybody, which is why the percentage isn't as high. Um, but definitely, a fifth of the people would love to be their own boss, and be able to move and shift as they do please. And then obviously the tax benefit of being a freelance employee, um, having your own organization, there's definitely some perks that come with that for sure. So conversely, 45% of freelance would consider switching to a permanent role. And again, I think when you talk about attraction and retention, some of these kind of overlap, right? And we've discussed this a little bit, but like, look at that percentage: 87% of people that are doing freelance work or contract work, the reason they would make a move is for the stability and the job security. You're a full-time employee, you have those benefits, you know what to expect. Um, Projects don't end all of a sudden, so there's something to that, right? Like, depending on the individual and what they're looking for. If they don't want to do contract work per se, stability is the main driver. But obviously, you see salary up there, you see career progression. There's a theme here, whether, like I said, it comes with attraction and or retention. Career progression is one of those things that people are saying are super important to them. Stable income, we kind of work our way down, a generous benefits package. But again, we talked about benefits, and yes, they're very important, but the stability and the ability to grow within the organization is still outweighing those. The salary is still outweighing the benefits. So if you're solely focused on offering a good benefits package, I would rethink and just like look at these numbers. Flexible, agile working, again, remote working options, a more senior role with responsibility. So these are all some of the reasons. I think it again kind of comes down to all the things we know about working at a company direct and the offerings that they have. So we mentioned this in the beginning that burnout is a real thing, and I think one of the things that we should take away from when we say the word burnout is, I think many people on this call, I know I'm guilty of it, would say burnout, I'm just working too many hours. Sure, that's a component of burnout, but and we talk about, like, you see there right in the center, missed or delayed deadlines, but like burnout could be like a poor culture. Burnout could be the work environment is loud and noisy and it's hard to get things done. It could be um you know a stressful environment that causes poor mental health. So I don't want everybody on this call, when that's why we didn't want to just blanket say burnout. again, burnout isn't working. I think people want to work. There's other factors that cause them to, maybe it is the career progression. It's just what we were talking about earlier. Rowan mentioned like not having a change, and that might burn you out. It doesn't mean you're working, 90 hours a week and don't get to see your family, but there's just other factors that equate to burnout. And I definitely think that it's important that employers know those different things. And here are some of those. So I kind of leave that there for, people to kind of see and soak in for a second. So on average, professionals who received a pay raise in the last 2 years saw their pay increase by 20%, which is great. That's awesome. When it comes to some of the end user employers on this call, you can see that 48% of individuals receive their incremental pay increase. That's great. Now, conversely, 25% had to leave that place and change employers to get that promotion or get that pay increase. And then 25%, 26%, same number. So you're either jumping to go to another employer or you're getting the promotion. And that's probably the reason you'd stay. So, maybe there's a correlation there. I didn't get the promotion, so I changed employers. It's about half. And then on the other side with the partner channel as well, you're not seeing as many need to change employers to get that pay increase. And we said this earlier, right? The partners might pay a little bit better than the end users. So getting the pay increase isn't, maybe the thing that's driving. Just kind of something to think about there. So here's some of the challenges that like an organization like ours face with the market as it is. So we obviously have increased competition. So there's the talent pool is shrinking, and there's more organizations. I don't know necessarily like us because we're very niche and we're laser focused on Microsoft, but as a general, tech staffing challenge is increased competition. We're trying to find organizations that can pay market rate, like Rowan mentioned. Like, you don't have to be the highest paying employer, but you can't be the lowest, right? So you've got to kind of understand what the market rate is and keeping up to speed with that. Talent retention, which is what we've talked about a lot, finds itself right there in the middle. Lack of resource capacity in-house and lack of skills, experience in the market. These are all these things that make it hard for us to match up candidates with employers. So again, the partnership of understanding an organization's environment and what makes them appealing, what makes them a challenge, it definitely helps us when we're going through our process. And because it is very challenging to match the right person with the right organizations and make that person be the best fit, not just on paper for their organization, but for all those other factors that drive someone, to go to a place versus another place. So it is a little more complicated than, hey, let's call Nigel Frank, hand me 3 resumes, we'll hire one. There's a lot of driving factors, and there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen between the staffing and consulting company and the client. So we talk about the digital skills gap, and again, it's a very, very real thing. Finding the right talent is just so hard for organizations. And I think about all of the clients that we work with, VPs of IT directors, CTOs, CIOs. They're very, very busy people, right? And they need to get their projects done, but to actually go, spend time finding the talent is a very time consuming thing. And you see, it's probably the biggest challenge that employers face is like, I just don't have time to actually go find it, and or have time to, like I said on the last slide, maybe articulate what it is I actually need to the staffing and consulting firm that's maybe helping me find the talent to hit a home run on the first go around. So, on top of attracting candidates to your organization, having the time to go find those organizations and sell them on your organization, the candidate pool is small as it is, right? So this is definitely a very challenging thing in the market. I think we see, and I don't want to speak out of turn here. I'm not trying to, but I think just from my vantage point, having been in this industry a very long time, you see organizations laying off individuals not in the IT department first. They start with other areas because this gap is so big, and every organization is driven around their technology, and they just don't have enough talented people at any given time to do all the initiatives they have to scale their business. So again, this is why when you find good people, you have to keep them, and when you find a staffing or consulting organization that meets your needs, keep them, work with them, because that's there is this huge hole for organizations, and technology is only evolving and ever changing, and it's hard for all the candidates to keep up with that. Sometimes your organization is growing and you're upgrading your technology, but have the candidates kind of come along at the same time with that. And obviously every organization is doing that, so you see a lot of competition for the same talent, etc. So you all can read the slide, but this is a real challenge, and I'd love to talk about it in the Q&A, to be completely honest. So before we get into diversity, Rowan, you want to give your recap on that side?
Yeah, like the key point I would pull out is what you were talking about on burnout. I think generally speaking, people want to work hard, they want to achieve their goals, they want to make a big contribution to the organization, complete the project successfully. So there's no issue on people working hard. I think almost everybody in the technology industry would say, yeah, sometimes that means working long hours. I think the burnout comes in where, number one, the long hours are relentless and it never stops. But more often, it's again back to this feeling that I'm doing the same work, the same function, the same contribution over and over again. And from an employer's point of view, you can see why that would happen, because the pressure is on to deliver the project. The best person to do this piece of work is the person who's always done that piece of work, because they can pick it up. We know they can do it. They just can complete it relatively quickly and then move on. So it's a completely understandable challenge. I think the biggest impact a company could make if you were trying to improve your retention is to start trying to figure out, how do you alter individuals' remit? Can you start exposing them to a different function, a different skill, a different part of the project that it doesn't even have to be that exciting. In fairness, it just has to be different. And I know it's easy for us to say here while we're on a call, and it's totally different to do when the time pressure comes and there's deadlines to be met and the work must get completed. But it really is a great thing to try to do. And even if it's in small steps, that you're altering 10% of what somebody does, that evolves into 20% and 30%. And over time, the person is doing different things. People really appreciate that. They notice that it has a massive impact. So that would be, for me, the key part about retention would be for employers, just consider that.
Yeah, love it. Thank you. So moving on to diversity and inclusion, and it's obviously a very, very important area for organizations. Like this is where the world is going, and we find it very important for organizations to kind of stay on top of some of the diversity initiatives that are happening, not only within their organization, but within other organizations. Like this is a thing that individuals want to be part of organizations that are diverse and progressive. And it's important to cultivate that environment when it comes to attracting the best candidates, especially in a market that's very tight. So what are organizations' top ED&I priorities? ED&I, equity, diversity, inclusion, you might see it as DE&I, depending where you are, but pretty much all the same thing. So yeah, the employees, you can't take it for granted, right? Like I think, some of the most progressive organizations are believe they have individuals that emulate the organization's ED&I efforts, and fit within the culture and the vision of the organization when it comes to diversity. But you still should offer a training, right? Like we always should be evolving when it comes to this topic. We want to be, if I was an employer on this call, you can see that like other employers are investing in training to ensure that they're not taking for granted what they assume their employees are how they feel and how they're acting within the company culture. So creating inclusive company culture, kind of parlaying right into that, you want to have an environment that emulates the outside world, right? It's important that maybe some of your statistics within your particular office and your particular demographic emulate the outside demographics. We've seen that a lot as a really important factor when it comes to retention and attraction. So pay equity, we know that that has to become, it just has to become regular. It's just unfortunate that that's still a thing. And then building a diverse workforce, creating systems, processes in place to make people feel safe, make people feel included. You can't, we realize you can't just say that you are, you got to put those processes in place, show those things to the employees, writing more inclusive job ads, even things such as like blind recruitment. I think there's a lot of unconscious biases that, people's intent maybe aren't bad when they're hiring. A way to maybe prevent some of that is having a blind recruitment process. So there's a lot of really like neat things that are happening. But our recommendation is, we know how important it is from a candidate standpoint that organizations need to embrace this if they haven't, and not just embrace it, but kind of live it and always be evolving when it comes to these different ED&I initiatives that we're seeing out, in the marketplace. So here's just some stats that I'll read to you. 63% of organizations have invested in resources into ED&I initiatives. 57% have stated their employer has a clear ED&I policy. So that's great. 57% have a clear ED&I policy, but that means, what? Almost 40% don't. So kind of something to consider there. 54% of Microsoft professionals reported the workforce includes people with disabilities and neurodiversity. So, we'd love to see that get to 100, right? We want to be embracing everybody. Diversity isn't just the color of your skin and things of that nature. It's gender, it's the American Disabilities Act and all those things. So 81% of respondents agreed that people of all cultures and backgrounds are respected and valued in their organization. That's great to see. We're working our way towards 100 here. So, of the individuals that we had the opportunity to speak to in the Azure space, more than 80% feel that the environments that they're in cultivate respect and value for everyone around. 61% of the respondents that we spoke to say that policies in place support employees' mental health. Another thing, to factor in, again, what does diversity mean? Again, it can be supporting individuals that are going through challenges that maybe we don't see, and having outlets for them to talk to people, feel safe, feel like they can communicate maybe what's bothering them in the office or outside of the office. And then lastly, 76% of Microsoft professionals identifying as female believe there's gender inequality in the tech industry. No surprise here. I think the technology sector is working to make it not such a male dominated industry, but it's not there yet. So that's a high percentage that feel that there's inequality in the tech industry. So I know it's an area of improvement, and you're starting to see more females enter the IT space, but it's still very lopsided. So we're almost coming to the end here. Here's some of the takeaways that I think we kind of got from this, and I'd be happy to talk more on these or talk about some other topics as we get to the Q&A. But we've analyzed and implemented some market trends for your specific business. We've realized a competitive salary on its own isn't enough for attraction and retention. And we talked about some of those reasons. We believe it's important that you invest in employee training and development. We've seen employers are starting to do that, but not enough. I think was that like 50% are doing that. Employers and employees must work together to improve diversity within their organization. And then the remote topic, flexible work models are no longer a perk. They're kind of becoming the norm. We saw 43% of people in the Azure space actually work fully remote. So that's kind of it in summation. I know we're kind of getting on the hour here, and we booked an hour and a half. So I'm really excited about the Q&A. Aaron is going to kind of jump in, and we've got some. I've already see the chat has some questions. So my recommendation would be put your questions in the chat. I'll ask Joe to chime in from time to time with some of the questions and kind of give his insight as an employee of Microsoft who is specifically working in the Azure space.
Perfect. Thanks, Patrick. To kick things off with, it looks like we have some questions regarding certifications. One being, as a candidate, what does Nigel Frank see presenting candidates with certifications if we see that as something that's very valuable to the customer? I would say without a doubt, we see this particularly when we're working with, say, HR or not very technical hiring managers. It's a little bit of an insurance policy. They're not technical people. It's hard for them to qualify someone's skill set on a highly technical standpoint. These certifications let them know this candidate knows what they're doing and at least has a baseline knowledge when making the investment to bring someone on as a new team member. From the client perspective with certifications is, how do I encourage employees to get more certifications? I think the biggest thing with that is time and money. Certifications are expensive, and they also require a lot of time when preparing and to actually get their certification. So if the employer will pay for the certification, that's massive, as well as allow time during the workday for the candidate to prepare.
So Joe, I'm curious from like your standpoint, you all approach end users all the time. Maybe you're selling Azure services. Do they insist that the individuals be certified in specific areas, or do they just sort of trust that Microsoft's the expert? Like, what do you see when it comes to like certs and your peers and some of the customers that you're targeting or working with?
I think while the certifications are absolutely of value, and frankly, I think the most value that they provide is to the individual gaining those certs. We as employees have to get them. I'm certified left and right, and I learn from a technical perspective, even though I'm in sales. I learn a lot from those certification courses and the exams. So I think the value that they provide is kind of an upskilling motion to the actual individual. But I do think that a customer would much prefer someone who's got, say, a significant amount of experience actually working within the Azure space in one way or another. So I would not discount certifications, but the more experience somebody has working in Azure, the more projects they can point to, and the more substantive conversations they can have about their experience in the Azure space is probably more important than the certifications. Although, again, the certifications do matter.
Okay, good insight.
And to continue off that, Joe, what are you excited about in the Azure space in 2023?
Where do I start? I think the one thing that we've done as an organization really well is we've gone out and engaged customers, across all different silos and industries, if you will. I focus specifically in financial services and banking, but my counterparts in healthcare and manufacturing and retail, we've all done the same thing over the past 4 to 5 years, which is we've seeded accounts. We've just established a footprint, big or small. We've gained the trust from the customers with regards to leveraging Azure as their public cloud, the public cloud vendor, if not entirely, as a majority. And I think that we've the first wave of our work of establishing the template, the landing zone, and just a base for a customer to start in is really what we've done the last 4 or 5 years. This upcoming year, I think we're going to see these customers begin to walk and talk on their own. We're going to see a lot of our customers begin to do a lot of their build out and begin to consume more and port more production applications into Azure, build them natively. I think that's going to be pretty exciting. I think the customers are going to feel a lot more confident in their abilities, their IT staff on down, being able to handle some of these asks the organization is making of them with regards to, beginning to leverage the public cloud for both operational and cost efficiencies.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question we have come through is, with more companies transitioning into office work, do you have any suggestions on how to retain tech workers who really prefer fully remote? Patrick, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. This is kind of like it's a nonstop challenge. I think that what we're seeing is the hybrid policy is becoming the most coveted. I think people realize that you can work remote sometimes, but there's sort of that safety net in having someone be there locally. But the skills gap is very real, like we mentioned, and you might just not be able. So you've got to kind of understand what you're willing to sacrifice. Is having that person sitting next to you, collaborating with the team, being local more crucial than maybe having the person with the exact perfect skill set. So it kind of comes down to, I'm not sure I'm necessarily answering the question, but this is kind of what employers face is it's very hard to have your cake and eat it too and find the perfect person for your environment, because they are so few and far between, and they're probably the perfect person for a lot of people's environment. So the more flex you can give them is beneficial. Now, that said, I do know a lot of individuals that like to go on site. They just don't like to go on site all the time, or they don't like to fight Los Angeles, New York, Atlanta traffic, and they want flexible work hours to come in. So I think you just got to be creative and understand what drives the individual. But the more flexibility that you have, I think will drive better candidates to you.
Perfect. Joe, we have another question for you. Just talking about, it seems like Azure is making such an impact in the California and Arizona market. Can you just speak to that a little bit of the growth in this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. You wouldn't think that geography plays a big part in, what cloud vendors have success and which ones don't. Azure, and frankly, I can't take any credit for this just because I sell into, one single large bank that is global. So I don't sell locally, even though I'm based in Arizona. I think that with so many companies relocating into the greater Phoenix area, it provided them an opportunity to rethink their IT stack and how they wanted to run their business from an IT perspective. And our competitors, certainly they do a good job, but I think Microsoft has done a very good job of focusing on the folks that want to take an entrepreneurial look at their IT stack. I don't know how else to explain it. And with, a lot of the relocating of headquarters and what have you, that has happened over the past 3 or 4 years out here, I can tell you that's played a huge role into why Azure's had success in Arizona. With regards to California, I think while we've certainly had a ton of success there, so is Google. Google's there and Google's real. And kudos to their team and their platform for earning the trust of different customers to leverage their cloud platform. But I think the Microsoft story relative to Amazon and Google is a little bit different in that we're a true tech company and we're a true tech stack company. There's a lot of applications that many businesses use that are native to Microsoft and clearly, are more portable than into Azure than into AWS or Google. So I think that also has played a large role into why we've been successful in these areas.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question I can take, it's around a person wanting to switch from working at an end user into a partner and how exactly to get into the space. From my perspective, I see this a lot of obviously a partner interviewing a candidate can see you've had a lot of success working at an end user and you're good at doing that. But I think the number one thing partners are looking for is, do you have success touching and working on a lot of different Azure environments and understanding multiple different companies' needs and requirements and being able to adapt to that? So my biggest advice in making that a transition from an end user to a partner, it would be to utilize Nigel Frank. A good starting point, if you're not getting the traction yet, say you have a couple of years experience only at an end user, is to do some independent contract work with us. So you can say that you've done consulting, even though you haven't formally worked at a partner. That's a great stepping stone to bridge from just being an end user, maybe full-time employee, to more of a consultant is a great way of doing that as well.
Aaron, Kevin can comment on top of that.
Absolutely.
From my perspective, to everyone on the customer side or the end user side, some of my best counterparts, my best engineering counterparts, and my best partner engineering contacts have all come from the customer side. They've all had their hands, on Azure or whatever the technical focus may be. So if that is something you're thinking about, you will succeed.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very helpful insight. Thank you. And then it looks like one of our last questions here is just commenting on how the hiring cycle has changed in the past few years. That's definitely from something we've seen from the recruitment perspective, a lot of pre-COVID hiring to now. I think a big common denominator with that is just speed to hiring. It's interesting that pre-COVID, for a full-time permanent job, the hiring process typically from posting a job to a candidate starting was about 6 weeks. Now that's down to 4. So from an employer perspective, if you're having challenges keeping up with that pace, the thing that I've seen be super helpful from that perspective is consolidating the interview process. So I always recommend, instead of doing multiple rounds with a lot of individual people, do group interviews. It speeds up the process, as well as I've seen interviews be more productive having a group conversation. I've seen conversations with candidates that would not have happened if each of the people in the interview process would have just interviewed that candidate alone. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback from clients trying that out and adjusting what their standard interview process would be, and doing more group interviews and shortening the process.
Hey, Aaron, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time, and we really appreciate, people, everyone, dialing in. The Nigel Frank M365 and Azure Career and Hiring Guide is going to launch early next week. So everybody that registered on this link, you're going to get it. This is going to be resent out to you. This recording, along with the um, the downloadable version of the Career and Hiring Guide. I want to thank Joe for, kind of chiming in, giving us some perspective from his end. That's awesome. Really beneficial. I hope people were able to, see a different side, and use that in whatever questions or thoughts they had around, the Microsoft ecosystem. I'll say this lastly, on the way out, like it's we talk about retention and candidate and, the employer side and the candidate side. There's definitely, I know this is what I do and what Aaron does on a day-to-day basis, but when you align yourself with a good staffing and or consulting company, like Nigel Frank, who is very focused on working with Microsoft individuals only. So if you're a candidate and you think about your experience applying to jobs, you could be the absolute perfect person for that role. Unequivocally, you're the best person, but your resume 430 out of 600 that came into some HR person's inbox. And do they actually find you? Do they find you and do they show you as the best person? Or they go with the first three people that they clicked on? So there's a lot of risk in that, where when you're working with an organization like us, we do all that filtering and we present the top three candidates for your role. And it kind of takes out all of that time and that agony. Plus, also, we talked to, we were able to talk about how, like, culture and all those things that are important to an individual. When we have the relationship with the customer, we start to learn those things and we're able to articulate that to those candidates, so that we're not bringing candidates that are looking for those soft things within your organization to you if you don't have those, or you're not there, or something else is unimportant. So there's a reason that, this is a billion and billion-dollar industry globally. But I think sometimes that gets overlooked, that just the really strong relationship between, the staffing company and the client, whether that is a partner or an end user, is so crucial for both sides. Like, if you're hiring, you're narrowing down the best candidates and you're getting the best three candidates for your role out there in the market, most cases, versus having to sift through a million resumes and go through 20 interviews to find that person. And conversely, if you're a candidate and you're aligned with a good staffing company that has relationships, it's such a better experience than applying to a million companies and hoping that your resume falls in someone's inbox at the right time when they're looking, and they disregard the other 500 to 1,000 people that have applied that aren't the right fit. It's just something I kind of want to add there. So again, I really appreciate this. Everyone that contributed, thank you so much. Everyone that signed in, thank you so much. The Career and Hiring Guides, like I said, it launches early next week. If you sign up to this link, you will get a follow-up email from myself or someone else with the organization. And feel free to filter any questions to me, Aaron, Rowan, if you have them, about how to work with us, how to partner with us, just questions in general about the Microsoft space. We'd be happy to answer them. And again, thanks. So I'm going to sign off with that. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.